met her in the fall. He took her to a movie, and when they done it all, he took her to a movie.
Hello and welcome to the Fabulous Picture Show. I'm Amanda Palmer. This week we're screening the brilliant new film Frost Nixon, and it gets better because we'll be joined by the man himself, Sir David Frost, who'll be taking questions from our audience. In this Frost Nixon special, you'll learn how Britain's celebrity broadcaster got under the skin of former US President Richard Nixon.
Frost has hired 3 crack investigators.
Can I be crack one? Can I be deep crack?
It was the most watched news interview in history.
Nixon's legacy will always be criminal.
And you'll be spellbound as this famous raconteur spins one amazing tale after another.
Nixon immediately said, I wouldn't want to be a Russian leader. Now, you never know when they're being taped.
But first, when director Ron Howard saw the play Frost Nixon, it brought back memories of a disgraced president and those not-so-happy days.
Good evening. I shall resign the presidency at noon tomorrow.
This is an historic day, the only time a president has ever resigned.
In 1977, a 38-year-old British broadcaster, David Frost,
It's been yet another week for love, sex and marriage.
paid $600,000 to secure the first major interview with former US President Richard Nixon. 3 years after he'd resigned over the Watergate scandal. It became the most watched news interview in history.
If I intended to cover up, believe me, I'd have done it.
45 million Americans tuned in. Among them, the young actor and director, Ron Howard. What grips you most to this moment when you think back?
It's the look on his face. It's the seeing him suffering through him saying, "I let the country down."
I let down my friends. I let down the country.
I was not a Nixon hater when I was watching those interviews. I was frustrated, I was disappointed, but I wasn't 100% sure that he hadn't been some sort of victim of political assassination, that it hadn't been more just kind of expedient for him to step down, because there had been no trial.
Facing impeachment, Nixon resigned in 1974 after he was implicated for authorizing illegal activities, including a cover-up of a bungled burglary at the Democratic Party headquarters in the Watergate complex.
You're wanting me to say that I participated in an illegal cover-up? No.
The Frost-Nixon interviews made international headlines, and in 2006 they were adapted into a hit stage play by British screenwriter Peter Morgan.
I didn't think of this as a film at any point. I very much wanted this to be a play.
But after Morgan's scripts led to Best Actor Oscars for both The Queen...
Have we shown you how to start a nuclear war yet?
No.
...and The Last King of Scotland...
If I could be anything instead of a Ugandan, I would be a Scot.
Like, really?
He and David Frost, who owns the interviews, agreed to bring it to the screen.
You came to office promising peace. No sooner did you get into the White House than US involvement in Vietnam deepened. Did you feel that you'd betrayed the people?
I wish I'd gone in sooner and harder.
So what do you think? Have you managed to adapt it in your eyes?
I was very nervous, but a lot of people seem to prefer the film to the play.
In what respects?
They come to the film thinking that it'll be small and contained and theatrical, and I think they are surprised by how open it feels. Frost gallivanted, he sort of circumnavigated the globe. There are a lot of air miles in this story. And put on film, you suddenly get a sense of that. On stage, that was only ever suggested.
I spent yesterday watching you interview the Bee Gees. Weren't they terrific?
David Frost is played by Michael Sheen.
What have I done?
An original cast member from the play, as was Frank Langella, who'd won awards for playing Nixon.
I thought I made it clear. I didn't want to take any questions on Watergate. Get it?
The studio wanted us to explore the possibilities of some more bankable stars. But very soon, I think everybody came to their senses.
Matthew MACFADYEN plays Frost's producer, John Burt.
A full, no-holds-barred confession.
We'll get that.
From Richard Nixon.
Oliver Platt and Sam Rockwell are his research team.
If you ran for office again today, you'd get their support. You're making him look presidential, for sake.
And Kevin Bacon as Nixon's aide-de-camp, Jack Brennan.
Frost got there. He got the money.
I became kind of obsessed with the Watergate hearings, and I would come home from school every day and watch him on TV. And, you know, Nixon was really kind of despised in my household.
Khrushchev knew the chairman would talk to me, no one else. I was the only one that Mao trusted personally.
Take me back to 1977. Did you watch the original interviews?
No, I came to this as an adult.
Was there a defining moment for you that made you think this would work?
The defining moment for me as a dramatist was hearing how much division there was amongst the participants. And when I could see that what David Frost thought happened, and yet what other people thought happened were wildly in conflict with one another, I thought, for me, that was what was interesting.
Frost paid today's equivalent of $3 million for the exclusive interview.
I do hope that isn't coming out of your own pocket.
And one interesting question remains. Was Nixon's confession genuinely induced by Frost, or was it contrived?
I think it was a deal. Somewhere through the course of the interviews, it had to occur to both sides that they better do something exciting.
I disagree.
I think it's a gray area.
I think that the stakes were way too high for Nixon to act a confession.
He's acting. They're all acting. They just do. The minute that red light goes on, something happens to all of us. You change.
I think that's absurd. I'm surprised Frank said it. Let's create a controversy right now.
It's as real and true as this conversation is. And elements of this conversation that we're having are real and honest and truthful, and elements of it are performance.
I mean, if he was acting, he was an extraordinary actor.
I don't think he was that good of an actor.
And I said, I'm sorry. I just hope I haven't let you down.
I've never heard such an interesting sort of debate between all the actors. They're totally different opinions. What do you think?
In that moment, frozen and isolated, he was devastated and vanquished and crushed. If you play it within context, however, within 5-10 seconds after that, he was quite different.
I made so many bad judgments. The worst ones, mistakes of the heart.
So I do think it was about television creating a victory through the editing process. That was as, you know, repentant as Richard Nixon ever got, and David Frost elicited that.
A man in that top job, he's got to have a heart. But his head must always rule his heart.
You know, what David Frost did, whatever motivated him, you know, whether he was trying to create a television stunt or actually get at the truth, I don't really know. I don't need to know, because what it was accomplished was a moment of clarity for me that sort of peeled away the fuzz and the haze and allowed me to understand that, yes, our president had betrayed us. And in a way, justice had been done.
The American people need a conviction, pure and simple. The integrity of our political system, of democracy as an idea, entirely depends on it. And if in years to come people look back and say it was in this interview that Richard Nixon exonerated himself, that would be the worst crime of all.
When Nixon agreed to the Frost interviews, it wasn't all about the $600,000 paycheck, nor was it the chance to make a confession. No, he wanted to remind everybody that there was a lot more to his 13.5 years in power than just Watergate.
Frost is just not in your intellectual class, sir. You're going to be able to dictate terms, rebuild your reputation.
I think
I'm certain.
it would be. It's so good to go back to where the action is. You know, the hunger in my belly is still there, John.
Nixon, a career politician, long understood the way television can sway public opinion.
My fellow Americans, I come before you tonight as a candidate for the vice presidency.
Running mates with future President Eisenhower in 1952, Nixon went on national television to deny taking illegal contributions, except for one thing.
We did get something, a gift. It was a little Cocker Spaniel dog, and our little girl, Tricia, the 6-year-old, named it Checkers.
It was one of the first political uses of television, presenting him and his family as everyday Americans.
Pat doesn't have a mink coat, but she does have a respectable Republican cloth coat. And I always tell her that she'd look good in anything.
And America ate it up. Nixon's team won. But 8 years later, a televised debate against a telegenic Democrat, John F. Kennedy, lost him a shot at the presidency.
Mr. Nixon comes out of the Republican Party. And it is a fact the Republican leadership has opposed federal aid for education, medical care for the aged.
And in 1962, after he lost a bitter race for governor of California, it looked like Nixon's political career was over.
You don't have Nixon to kick around anymore.
But then, in 1968, came Act Two.
I will faithfully execute the office.
Nixon was back in the White House in the big job.
President of the United States.
Nixon may have been despised by the left for such acts as secretly bombing Cambodia.
This is not an invasion of Cambodia.
But he also ended the Vietnam War and historically reached out to Communist China and the Soviet Union, with whom he signed nuclear arms control treaties. In 1972, he won a second presidential term in a landslide, taking 49 of the 50 states. With 12 years already in America's two top posts, he was at his height until...
I had no prior knowledge of the Watergate break-in.
Facing impeachment, Nixon bowed out.
I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
His successor, Gerald Ford, gave him a complete pardon. Nixon disappeared from public life with no trial and no confession. Until his 1977 television interview with David Frost.
You know, it's a funny thing that I've never been challenged to a duel before. No holds barred, eh? No holds barred.
The film is absolutely clear that David scored a victory over Richard Nixon, and under the terms that are made quite clear in the play, that is also the case.
If you say that you believe you gave victory to David, what do you think you gave to Nixon?
For me, it has to be some form of defeat. I do feel that Nixon's legacy will always be criminal.
I have impeached myself. That speaks for itself.
How do you mean I have impeached myself?
By resigning.
What the interviews did for me was, even when I sort of wanted to forgive, they didn't really allow me to. I could appreciate, and I understood this very kind of complicated idea that somebody could be brilliant, even as sort of a visionary, and still damnable, still wrong, in need of punishment.
Nixon died in 1994.
May the day of judging President Nixon on anything less than his entire life and career come to a close.
But the debate may rage forever.
Right now, I submit it's impossible to feel anything close to sympathy for Richard Nixon. He devalued the presidency, and he left the country that elected him in trauma.
And in part two, we'll be joined by Sir David Frost himself for a Q&A on his new film, Frost Nixon.
He met her in the